Oh, hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar. I'm Francis Seeley from Enfield Climate Action Forum, and today we're going to interview Sarah Hayes, who I think, and she tell us if I'm wrong, is the operations manager in CleanupUK. And that it's an interesting organisation, that, because many people are concerned with the state of our streets. They think it's sort of untidy. They think there's a lot of litter on it. And a lot of people want to do something about it. And CleanupUK exists to do that, to do something about it. So we're going to talk to Sarah about what they do, how they approach this problem, and how they involve others. So Sarah, welcome to this webinar today. It's great to have you here. And maybe you could start, like I always start, asking people to tell us very briefly, a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay, thanks, Francis, for inviting me to talk to you. Really kind. So I head up the operations team at CleanupUK. I do live in Enfield. I'm an Enfield resident. I have been working in the voluntary sector for over 20 years now, and I've worked with lots of different groups of people. But for the last 8 years, I've been working for CleanupUK, working with people to help support them to form community cleanup groups where they live, to basically take care of their neighbourhoods and help make that easy for them.
Okay, so that's your background, and that's really interesting. But now you are involved in CleanupUK. I mean, tell us what that is and what you do there.
So CleanupUK is an anti-litter charity, and we support local people to come together to look after where they live by cleaning up their local environment. So we're not really about campaigning. We're quite a small charity in terms of our size, but we have a very wide reach because we work with people all over the country. CleanupUK was set up by a man called George Monk, who is our chief executive. In 2008, he launched a website called Litter Action in partnership with the Campaign to Protect Rural England. And Litter Action was a way that litter picking groups around the country could have a profile and record what they were doing and sort of get in contact with each other. So there's a map and you can have a profile page and people can find you. That website has since been merged into our website, but our actual kind of face-to-face work on the ground started, the first tranche of funding was in 2011. In the 5 Olympic boroughs in London to tidy up before the visitors arrived type thing. We're still in 12 boroughs in London, and that kind of developed into the Beautiful Boroughs project, which I think is how you and I came into contact. So that was supporting individual litter picking groups in London. Then in 2017, that expanded to Birmingham, and we had the Beautiful Birmingham project. Then the lockdown hit us, and people were really restricted in what they could do. People, if you remember, couldn't meet up in groups at one stage, and people were a bit scared. Some people were a bit scared of picking up litter because of contamination. But then also people started using their green spaces a lot more because they were working from home, and they started going for their hour of exercise and appreciating the world around them. So interestingly, we also had an uptake in people saying, can I do something about this litter situation? And of course, all the masks and stuff added to the litter problem and the plastic everywhere. So we really had a good think and time to kind of think, how can we reach more people during the lockdown? And we were forced to communicate with each other like this, whereas we used to have face-to-face meetings, kind of embrace technology and realize that we can work quite closely with people anywhere because we can have a conversation like this, which feels more like a face-to-face meeting. So we came up with the concept of cleanup hubs, community cleanup hubs, and starting community partnerships around the country.
Well, let's talk about the hubs in a minute, because those are really an interesting development in what you're doing. I mean, from your view and the view of your own organisation, I mean, how big a problem do you think litter is in the UK, and how strongly do people feel about it?
Well, people feel very strongly about it. I was quite you know, I guess whatever your political leaning, you don't like litter. Nobody wants to live in a littered environment. So apart from the fact that it looks terrible, the cost implications are quite mind-blowing. So 30 million tonnes of litter are dropped every year, and we spend almost £1 billion picking up litter each year in this country. And I think fly tipping costs us every year something like £60 million to remove. I know what I would rather my taxes were spent on, and it's not that. You know, it doesn't have to be there. So there is definitely a sort of behaviour change that we need to see. And litter picking is part of the answer to that problem. And it's also just kind of getting it into people's consciousness. You know, people might not join a litter pick, but they can see if local people are making that statement that they want to make they care about their environment and they want it to be cleaner. So it's changing how people think, I think, is also really important.
Yeah, I gather that you've got something like 493, nearly 500 groups across the country, and you've got, nearly 2,000 volunteers. Now, how do you get those? Do they come to you and say, look, how do we get involved with you? Or are you proactive and you go out in different areas and try and get people involved there?
It's all different, really. They're not our groups, so I don't really feel that I can say they're our groups. They're groups that we support. So we're more about community engagement than volunteering directly, than the traditional kind of model of volunteering. We don't say, will you have a cleanup for CleanupUK? We say to people, can we help support you to do something about your situation where you live? And we try to be quite flexible in terms of, you know, responding to whatever someone needs. So if we have, and we've still got, as you said, a lot of people registered on our website who are independently running their own litter picking groups, and they sometimes come to us for queries, issues that they might be having, ideas for things that might help. You know, they might have a big dog poo problem, or they might want to know how can we go about engaging younger people or something like that. And we, you know, if we don't have the answer, then we can kind of point them in the direction of finding the answers. I guess we kind of want everyone to litter pick, and we want everyone to be able to do it. So we're about shining a light on what people are doing, rather than saying, look what we've done. We don't kind of march into an area and have a clean up. We would definitely work with people. It's about community engagement rather than, you know, there's no point in going into an area and having a clean up if you don't live there. That's not going to be something that that continues and has any longevity. So
you work with local groups that already exist and who actually want to do a clean up in their area, and you provide them with help and support. But you have done that in a way, and in an unstructured way, haven't you? And you're now looking at how you can do that in a more structured way by what you call community cleanup hubs. And you mentioned that earlier, but you're beginning to develop that. And is that right? Is that your sort of next stage of development?
Yeah, so our previous model was working directly with groups. So we would help them access equipment, whether or not we lent it to them or their local council lent it to them. We would ensure that they had the right, if you're going to do a litter pick, you need to speak to whoever deals with the waste removal at your local authority. So it might be in-house, as they call it. So it could be a council waste team, or it could be an organisation like Veolia, operating quite a lot of the boroughs in London, for example. And you can't just go and leave 20 or 30 bags of litter in a park and expect them to be picked up. Obviously, you need to kind of, the council or the waste removal team need to build that into what they're doing. So we kind of try and build the bridge, I guess, between the kind of official channels of cleaning up and then the less official volunteering activity. So it's about providing the right equipment. There's a little bit of health and safety in there as well. You know, if you're going to get a group of people together, we kind of help people think through what risks could be and how they might tackle them. We try and make it try and avoid bureaucracy, I guess I would say, but also to keep people safe, and make sure that people have got the right equipment, and they kind of thinking about what, if someone could hurt themselves, who's going to deal with that situation, that kind of thing.
So how would the community hubs be organised? I mean, how would you set them up?
So the community hubs, we have in the last year kind of been running this community partnerships work where we have funding available for equipment and we direct that to areas of deprivation. So some areas are defined on the indices of deprivation, the government indices, as being less well off than others. We know that. And there's a correlation between litter and deprivation. So as a small charity with limited funds, we put our money into those areas. We will, if someone wants to be a cleanup hub in another area, that's absolutely fine, and we'll help and support them too. We just won't fund their equipment. So the idea being that if we put kit into a community group or an organisation, that kit's going to reach a lot more people. If I put 20 litter pickers, 20 high vis, 20 pairs of gloves and hoops with someone who's already engaged with the community in, I don't know, Hastings, for example. I'm not in Hastings, but the local volunteering organisation we work with are already networked with that community. So they could potentially be lending out that equipment every day of the week. And that's a lot more litter picks than me giving equipment to one group. So it's about trying to kind of upscale our impact. And there's no way we can afford to have a person on the ground in every single town in the country, but we can work with whoever this way.
So a hub is not necessarily a physical place. It's just a series of resources that people can go to. And a hub is a way of sharing what those resources are to the local community.
I mean, we need a local place. We need a venue to store the equipment. So if we're having equipment sent somewhere, we do need to make sure that someone's in charge of that equipment. But for example, if you're a community worker in a community centre and you're very, very busy, I know that you're not necessarily going to have time. You might want to, but you're not necessarily going to have time to organise litter picks. But if you're happy to sign out that equipment, you can become a litter picking cleanup hub, and we will promote the fact that that's what you're doing. Some organisations see it as a way to engage their service users, because anyone can litter pick. I've had 3-year-olds litter picking. I've had 90-year-olds litter picking. I've had people in wheelchairs litter picking. Literally anyone can do it. So, it's good for people's kind of sense of isolation because it brings people together. It's good for their mental health. It's good for their physical health. It's outside activity. So lots of organisations that work with all different types of service users actually really, it ticks their boxes. But it doesn't have to. It could be a local church is happy to store that equipment and have whoever in their area come in and borrow it from them. It's just kind of someone loaning it out and bringing it back in again. So that's how we're working now.
Yeah. I mean, is this an idea that originated in Scotland? Because I believe they have 100 hubs developed already. Is that one example that you're trying to replicate?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I've had a chat with them recently, a really good chat with them. We didn't know that they were doing that before we started. It was literally us kind of racking our brains thinking, how can we work bigger and how can we reach more people and put our funding to better use? But yeah, Keep Scotland Beautiful have got, I think they've been doing it a couple of years. They've got an enormous number. They had a really big response of organisations and people wanting to start litter picking hubs, and also Keep Wales Beautiful. Keep Scotland Beautiful, Keep Wales Tidy. Keep Wales Tidy have also done the same thing. And actually, we're having our website rejigged at the moment, but our idea is that we'll put their hubs on our map at some point as well in the future. Because, we're quite happy to work with whoever is interested in litter picking. We don't really see it as our territory or someone else's territory. And it's just great that people are litter picking, and we want to make it easier for them to do so. And by putting the equipment there, it's more likely that someone's going to come along and do it. If you have to figure out, you know, who do I need to speak to at my council in order to borrow equipment? Who do I need to speak to at my council in order to collect the litter collected? It's just giving people a helping hand, really, and trying to encourage them.
I mean, I'm trying to get my mind around how the hubs actually work. And I saw, I think on your site or somewhere, that you try to involve organisations in the hub concept, organisations like Council for Voluntary Services, CVS, City Farms, mental health charities, and so on. So a hub isn't something that just springs up. You really contact groups maybe and see if they want to be involved in it. And if they do, how do they get involved?
Yeah, I mean, we started off by approaching likely candidates. Volunteer centres and CVSs seem like a really good idea to us because they're obviously networked into all of the volunteering organisations in their communities, because that's who they support. And yeah, some of them have worked really well. Got a couple of those in Essex, the one in Hastings. We do have some requirements, you know, like we've signed an agreement with them that they will loan equipment to local people. They'll look after the equipment, and they'll just let us know how they get on. So it's I'm trying to make it as easy as possible again. So either they can let us know what activities, what litter pickings have taken place, or the people who do the litter picking let us know. So, for example, I was chatting to a guy who had some mental health issues, and as kind of part of his healing process, got really into litter picking and engaging volunteers. And he came upon one of the hubs, and he's now leading litter picks alongside loads of other activities in his community. So he's using the hub, but he's not running the hub. He's borrowing equipment from the hub to do his litter picking. So that's another thing we've found really interesting, is to talk to the people who've borrowed the equipment and kind of shine a light on what they're doing. So we're quite keen to, you know, write up case studies about people that are doing it, because people litter pick for lots of different reasons, I think. You know, some people are concerned about the environment. Other people do it because it's really sociable and it's really fun, and you meet people and you make friends, and you maybe have a cup of tea and a slice of cake at the end of your litter pick. And within just an hour, you can make a massive difference to where you live. And it's really satisfying to see that difference that you've made.
Okay, I mean, you mentioned just now when you're talking about the person who you know, helps out and has developed a hub and sort of finds out where to borrow equipment and uses it himself. And you use the term he's not running it. I assume that for a hub to be successful, it needs to be run. There has to be some people who are key people who do run it, who act as the engagers and the catalysts in an area. I mean, how do you find those people, and is there any support or training you can give to them?
So we are working with people who are already working within their community. So it's kind of, it's a community, either a local charity or an organisation or a group who have a base where they can host the equipment. So I'm not going to begin to tell them how to do their job, but yeah, we give them as much advice and support. We give them a hub pack, it's called. You know, we help them promote what they're doing. We help. If they want advice, we will spend time helping them think about how to attract people to litter picking. But usually they've already got kind of groups of people that they work with. So it's about promoting it locally. I can promote it all I like on my website, but I suppose there's nothing like seeing a poster up in your local, on your community notice board or in your park saying, you know, that's how most volunteering takes place, isn't it, really? It's through word of mouth and kind of local people saying what they're doing. Sometimes people contact us because they've seen that we're working with someone close to them, and they say, can I be involved? I like the idea of this. And I mean, with the groups, when we were just working directly with groups, we found that once we went into a new area, we had to kind of go out and make our connections ourselves. But then once you get up and running and the ball starts rolling, it has a bit of a snowball effect. So, for example, in Enfield, when we started working in your borough, in our borough, we kind of had a couple of people maybe we went and spoke to. We always would go into an area and see who's doing what. You know, if there's already a litter picking group there, they'd be the first choice. And we'd go and say to them, why are you litter picking? Is anyone else interested? Do you think you could help us? It's about trying to get people to do it who've never done it before, really. So we've got the Enfield Society, do litter picks. We've got a group in Hillyfields, Enfield Chase, Oakwood, Southgate, Edmonton, Bush Hill Park, Palmer's Green. It's really taken off, and people do really care about getting involved. And when groups see that someone else is doing it, or maybe their friend told them that they got involved, that's how it works, really. Local radio, local notice boards. And they are, some of the areas,
I was going to say friends of parks as well, obviously, get involved in this.
Definitely. Some of the groups we've worked with have used litter picking as a kind of catalyst to bring people together to do something in their park where there wasn't an official Friends of the Park group. And from those regular litter picks, they formed a regular Friends of the Park group, like an official group. And then they obviously go on to do loads of other activities. It's quite complementary, I think, to other community activities. So some people maybe see an area that attracts fly tipping and is just a bit of a dump and nothing much happens there. It's a bit of a no man's land, and they kind of adopt it and tidy it up, and maybe they turn it into a community garden or a vegetable garden. And once you change the use of that space, it kind of then puts people off going and dumping their rubbish there. It's kind of doing something positive about a negative issue, I think, and leading by example and claiming our kind of communal outdoor space and saying, actually, someone cares about this area and it's not okay to drop litter there. And it really does make a difference. You know, lots of groups we've worked with have litter picked the same park over a number of weeks, and they'll say to us, we're picking up less bags of litter than we were when we started, and originally we were getting 30 bags. Now maybe we're getting 10, because they've kind of gotten on top of the issue. They feel safer, parks feel safer. Bush Hill Park actually is a good example of that. There was a lady who had been the chair of that organisation for many years, and she said, I want people to come and engage in the park, because it was a few years ago, they'd stopped kind of showing that they care about it, and levels of antisocial behaviour had increased. And they've since had a new chair, Carol, who I think you know, and she's brilliant. She's got weekly litter picks going on. She's got community gardening going on. She's got bike rides going on for people with learning disabilities and special needs. And it's a really well-used park now. And the feel of the park, local people say to us, has really, really changed. And in fact, the local police say, levels of antisocial behaviour have decreased. Because you've got to use your outside space, haven't you? Yeah,
I mean, I was, you mentioned Carol, and I know you mean, and she's fantastic, and it's an example really of what you do, and you've already sort of referred to this. So that's important. That it's not just about litter picking. It is also about bringing people together, isn't it, and creating a sense of community. And organisations litter pick in order to deal with a problem, but they also litter pick to bring people together. And I think that's what you were saying, that people do get a sense of community. So, I mean, if someone wanted to start one and they contacted you, they were an individual or a group, where do they go from there?
Well, how do they contact us?
Yeah. So they contact you and they ask, what do we do? I'm an individual. I contact you and I say, look, I want to get a litter picking project going. How do I do it? What would you tell them? What would you tell me?
What I would tell you, I would try and ascertain whether or not really you want to start your own litter picking group, or if you actually would just like to find out what's going on in your area and join some litter picks first, because some people don't want to lead a group, but they just want to litter pick. Or I would find out if perhaps you might be a potential hub leader. Like if you ran a community organisation, you could work with us in that way. So I try and be responsive to what it is I think that would help you.
And I mean, what support do you have? Are you a very small organisation, or do you have others who can get involved in your organisation in helping, or you just run off your feet?
We are quite busy. It's a simple thing, isn't it? Litter picking. It's making sure you've got the right equipment. It's making sure you've got a group if you want a group, or some people do it on their own. That's fine. We are about bringing communities together. That's why our organisation exists, because we think there's something really magical happens when people come together and they do something positive for their neighbourhood. So some people ask us how they can find a group. So it might be that I give you some suggestions as to how you can find other interested people to create a group with you. It really depends. It's kind of tailored to what people need. And the groups, like the groups that I mentioned earlier in Enfield, are amazing. And I wouldn't want to take that away from them. It's them that do the litter picking, not me. I just will hold their hand whilst they're getting up and running. And sometimes that's finding the right person for them to talk to in order to organise to have the litter removed. Sometimes it's talking them through the first litter pick. So I've been to a lot of first litter picks, and with our hubs as well, we're aiming to get to kind of an initial litter pick with them to just kind of walk them through it. But it's not difficult. Loads of people do it without any help from us, and they're also welcome to join us by logging their group on our map. So if you were litter picking and you said, look, I don't really need your help, Sarah, I've got some equipment, I know who to talk to at the council, I just want to let people know that I'm here so they can find me, you could join our website and be on our map, and people can contact you, so they could put in their postcode and search for what litter picking groups exist in that area. And so on our new website, we are going to have kind of a map of hubs and a map of groups.
Okay,
really.
So in the future, do you have any plans to develop? Is your concentration on building the community hubs now, or do you have any other plans for further development?
So in a couple of areas, we've got 4 or 5 hubs in some places already, small places. And our thinking is it's good to create spaces for those people to talk to each other. So we've got specific groups in some places, Facebook groups where people can chat and talk. And some of those hub leaders can be admins of those groups, and we've set them up for them so they can, support each other and talk about what their issues are and what works and what doesn't work. We've also got a national Facebook group where people from all over the country talk to each other, which is, it was the Litter Action, I think it might be still called the Litter Action Facebook group. There's one for Enfield. If you put in Clean Up Enfield, you can find that if you live in the borough. And yeah, I think we've got 30 hubs at the moment around the country. And I guess, once we've got a larger network, our thinking is we'll be able to do kind of regional events or bring people together to talk about certain topics and issues. It's something that's got to change, isn't it? It's something that upsets everybody when you drive around the country and you just see, the motorways are strewn with rubbish in some areas. And it's not something that, one group is going to solve, but it is a really simple, nice, easy thing for anyone to do where they live, to make an immediate visible difference.
Okay, so, we sort of come to the end of the 30 minutes. So if anybody wanted to start a litter pick or find out more about what you were doing nationally, where would they go? How would they make contact?
Okay, so they can email us. A good email address to use would be volunteering, one word, at cleanupuk.org.uk. And our website is www.cleanupuk.org.uk.
Okay, well, thank you for doing that, because I think it's an important movement you've got, and obviously having the national organisation, you say you're a small charity, but you do a lot of work for your size, and I think that helps all the local groups because they feel they're part of a sort of national movement. So they not only feel they're part of a national movement, they feel they're part of a local community as well. And both of those things, I think, are really, really important. So, thank you for the work you're doing, and thank you for doing the webinar, because I think people will find it interesting. And I know lots of people are so concerned about litter that they do want to make a difference. And I'm sure more and more people get involved. So thanks, Sarah, for doing the webinar today. And we'll end this interview now.